Dressel, I mean, I'm leaving.
If,
Recording is on.
okay, Ryan. It's all you.
Well, that's a question I had. If Lorraine is on, do we need a chair pro tem? Or can we even have one if we have a chair?
You know the Open and Public Meetings Act better than we do.
And Ryan, I mean, I hope I can stay on the whole time, but we will have to change locations in the middle of this meeting, and just not even knowing how my internet would be, you know, that's why we had to make this arrangement.
Why don't
So-
we make it up as we go then? So,
Yeah.
so as far as I know, the chair's the chair, but can we have a motion to nominate a chair pro tem during this meeting in case the chair drops off and to run the meeting with the chair's consent?
So moved, and that'd be Ryan.
I'll
Second.
second it. Second.
Any opposed besides me?
No,
You're doing so good. Yeah, thank you so much, Ryan. I hope I'll stay on, but I just don't know if it'll work.
No, it makes total sense. And I did offer to be the luggage carrier for our esteemed chair in Hawaii, but it was rejected. So
For the sake of accuracy, was that an abstention or honest opposition, Ryan?
we'll just go with abstention.
Okay.
Very, very well corrected. All right, welcome and introductions. Well, it seems like everybody got to know each other there for a minute. I don't see anybody who's not on the commission or staff. Am I missing anyone? Let me see here.
I think it's just us, and I'm putting the link to the materials in the chat if you would like to get them.
Perfect. I was wondering if I missed those or not, but
I tried to send them out, but I think that I didn't adequately send them out. So I apologize. There is not substantive new stuff in there except for one thing that's short.
so do I have a motion on consideration and approval of minutes?
I move you approve them.
and I second it.
We approve.
Anybody oppose the motion in second? Seeing none, it's unanimous in favor. Ms. Landau, pretrial working group update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair Luce. So in the drive, I put two documents that were just handed out in this meeting. So Michael Drexel has been in these meetings, Rich has been in these meetings, Tom has been in these meetings, and Senator Weiler has been in some of them. So after the 2020 session where pretrial went back and forth, people strangled each other, people survived, and then it ended up being what it was. The governor and leadership convened a working group to talk through all the issues around bail and pretrial release in Utah and how we want to structure a statute. So we've talked about a lot of issues. We've had a lot of working groups. There's lots of representation from bail there, but defense has a good representation. There are good prosecutors up there. And again, a lot of bail up there. So it's a little bit, it feels a little bit preordained, but that being said, I think there's still a lot of wiggle room. So the documents that are in the meeting materials, I wanted to make sure I shared with you since we're in those meetings. And if anyone has feedback on them, I personally have lots of feedback on them. We weren't given the opportunity yet to talk about them. The thing in the materials that is called the bail draft is sort of the combination of a bunch of ideas that we've been talking about, plus a lot of things that seem to have come from OLRGC and were not discussed by us. And then the other document is a document that Senator Weiler created to compare the different statutes that were debated in the 2020 session. So the language before and after. So I don't really have a substantive agenda item on this, except that I would encourage you all to look through those and give me your feedback. one of the issues that's coming up is whether we reintroduce a bail schedule in Utah. And there is also a pretty decent focus on the early appointment of counsel. So talking about, it's hard to talk about appointment of counsel at bail hearings because bail hearings in Utah don't happen out in the open the way they do in some other states, at least the first initial determination. So talking about whether we could get counsel at the jails or counsel at arrest or counsel even earlier than that process, or if we can get more information to counsel as soon as possible so that they can make a compelling argument for release, because we know, and Rich can tell you this, and Wally and Mary even better than I can, that the custody status of your client makes an enormous difference on the rest of the case, right? So if they're in custody, they can't help you gather information. They can't do half as much work. So talking about that early appointment of counsel, the problem I see is that we don't yet have a level playing field across the state so if there was a statewide mandate that said, hey, everyone from Ryan to Daggett to every city and every county, right? You've got to have counsel at first appearance. We couldn't implement it tomorrow. And so I've been trying to talk to the legislature about maybe a pilot project. I'm a little worried that if they give us funding for this, that it will come back and bite us when we ask for funding in the fall. So I've made sure to say, look, this is my concern. And the latest direction we got, and Michael was there, was from House leadership, was to sort of prepare an estimate along with what our estimated budget request would be for next year. So that we'll circle back to when we get to the summer working groups, because I think I'm going to need a lot of help from you all on that. We're convening a defender meeting from defenders around the state to try and talk through what are the obstacles, what are the challenges, how feasible is early appointment of counsel? Is it really going to make a difference given some of the other barriers? So it's pretty interesting. But yeah, that's my spiel. Any thoughts on bail and pretrial release from you all that you want me to carry back there or think about?
Tell me how many.
Joanna, hey, I think that we have some additional priorities from a defense perspective. Can you hear me okay? I'm not sure my camera's working, but.
You're
I
good.
can hear you.
Yes,
Okay. In addition to the early appointment, I think we're also looking at trying to maintain some kind of least restrictive condition language that was a part of 206. And equally important from an indigent defense perspective is if there is going to be bail imposed, that the courts do an ability to pay assessment and an evaluation before they impose bail. One of our concerns is that with a standardized bail schedule, it's likely to be found unconstitutional under both the equal protection and due process clauses. And that's a bit problematic if we go back to something, in my opinion, that looks like a bail schedule where everyone is treated the same. And I think the cases that have dealt with that, most recently the California Supreme Court, have seen those bail schedules to be unconstitutional. And the final pitch that I would make is that there not be presumptions of detention for certain categories of crime. From a defense perspective, I think that when you give the prosecutors the ability to file detention motions, and they're warning about 94% of those, also creating on top of that for certain categories of crimes, presumptions of detention, is a double obstacle that our clients would have to overcome. So I would suggest as an entity, those should be our, and I think Joanna agrees, at least I hope so. Those are our priorities in any kind of bail reform bill that we see moving forward in either in the interim session in November or in the actual session that starts next January.
If I may speak on the issue, I second everything that Rich has just said. And to be more blunt about it, a bail schedule is a schedule that says, let middle class and rich white people out and skew detention toward persons of color. And that's why it's going to be held unconstitutional ultimately, in my opinion. Also, it's not just that people who are not detained pretrial can help their defense counsel more in terms of preparation of their case, and therefore have a greater chance for successful outcome of the case. It is also that their lives are not utterly destroyed by the prosecution of the case in the first instance. If you lock someone up who has a job, a house, a car, a rental home, children being supported, pets being supported, no matter what is in the constellation of their life at that moment, almost all of it disappears if they are detained pre-trial. They lose homes, they lose vehicles, they lose jobs, they lose custody of and contact with their children, they lose their spouses, and after everything is destroyed, sometimes they're found innocent and found not to have deserved any of it. And sometimes they're found not to be guilty of nearly what they were originally charged with, and yet their lives have been destroyed. And now, if they weren't a person sort of forced to the margins of society before, they are now. And that's the kind of destruction of the people who are charged and presumed innocent that we should not support. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich and Mary. Well, I just left. I was going to ask him if he had any thoughts being in that public defense realm. Maybe we can circle. There he is. Ollie, did you have any thoughts you wanted to share on those issues, knowing that's your kind of daily work?
I particularly agree with what Rich said. I don't know that I have anything more to add right now, but holding people that can't afford to pay to get out just because of their financial status really disadvantages the defense and the ability to effectively defend these people.
Chair,
Yes.
this is Laureen. What I have learned in my work on the 2 state subcommittees and just learning a lot more about this is that the bail schedule has nothing to do with public safety. And so that's just a mystery to me. I think maybe that's not widely understood. You guys have described the other side of that, but it just doesn't have to do with public safety. So I just want that to be in the record.
Well, in additional thought, just exactly what she just said. I mean, the bail schedule is just such a completely arbitrary number on first-degree felonies, second-degree felonies, different kinds of felonies, ascribing some huge bail amount just based on the crime is unrelated to whether or not they are a danger to the public or not going to show up for court. I mean, those are the 2 issues. Will they appear in court? Are they a danger to the community if they're released? And setting an arbitrary, gigantic, usually unreachable, unbailable amount of money is a terrible idea.
Joanna, you were in those meetings. Is there any chance that any solution like the one that was in Senator Weiler's bill is possible?
I think I'll let Tom take that one. But
Okay, that's
yes, and.
Yeah, well, here's what I think is important to note is we're just barely starting, as Rich and those that have been involved, Mike and Joanna and several here that have been involved. We're just barely starting to get into the difficult part of the conversation. So things have been fairly calm and we've done the easiest work. The bail piece of this, having some level of bail in Utah, is going to have a lot of supporters. And I think one thing that everyone should at least have in their mind, regardless of whether it's right or wrong, is that played, in my estimation, in conversations that I've been a part of with the bail bond lobby groups and others, that played a role in what happened in this last session. And so I would say to everyone, I agree wholeheartedly that somebody staying in jail pre-trial based solely on their ability to pay is wrong. And we have to move the dial from that point. But from there to, so no bail at all, to having some type of bail in some parts of our criminal justice system, I think we should be talking and trying to see if there is any middle ground. Only not to say that's where the conversation should start with indigent defense. I agree with everything that's been said today. But at some point, I think I suspect that we'll land somewhere between 220 as it stands now and 171 as Senator Weiler's bill. I don't suspect it'll be necessarily between 220 and 206. That's only my opinion. And that's based on what happened partially during the session, some of the conversations. And I've heard some talk about, what about that individual that is OR released or there is no bail, and then while they're out, they don't appear? You know, is there a place to have bail play a role somewhere in the process? I don't know. And that's, in my mind, I'm at least keeping an open sense that there may be something. I would just hope that on the initial, the initial charge or arrest, and someone that doesn't have something in their history to say they're not going to show up, because I agree this is not a public safety issue, it's an appearance issue. Maybe for someone that has a history not appearing, maybe bail is appropriate. I don't know, but I think that's, if we have some room in there somewhere, that's probably where we need to at least be looking at options.
Okay.
But the lawn guy is doing the sprinklers. He said he'll set the ground when he's done.
Okay, so I'm
The power of the mute. Sorry about that. A little late.
Commissioner Drexel, I'm probably saying it wrong and I've heard it a million times. I apologize.
No, you nailed it. Drexel, good job.
I think the courts might have an interesting perspective that we might want to hear. And then after that, unless there's other thoughts, we can move to number 4.
Oh, I appreciate that, Ryan. Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting. The more time I spend with this and thinking about it and talking to people and learning from people, I'm realizing that, and reading cases, I'm realizing that the bail schedule itself isn't necessarily the problem. It's the way in which it's implemented, the way in which it's relied upon by judges or used by judges as a shortcut to decision making, and not making the individualized determination that's required. A bail schedule, I think, is permissible so long as it's not just by default, oh, it's a third-degree felony, $5,000. I don't care about who you are or what your situation is. If judges use it as a starting point and then say, now, knowing what the recommendation is on the bail schedule, who are you? What is your situation? Is this monetary amount relevant to and speak to the risk that you present within the criminal justice system? What is your ability to meet this amount? If I set it at this amount, are you going to remain incarcerated simply by virtue of not having access to resources? If that sort of inquiry is made on top of the recommended amount on the bail schedule itself is not an issue. The problem has come with it being convenient to not do all of that extra work because there's a lack of information. The judges don't have access to the information they need to make those sort of inquiries until well into the case. We're talking weeks into the case often. And as a result, it's just when we design the tool, we ought to be cognizant of the fact there will be a lack of information and design the tool to promote as much as possible an individualized determination that's required by the Constitution. Speaking to some of the things that you all said, and at the risk of boring you all to death, if I can share, this is sort of preliminary stuff, if it's okay. I put together some charts about the use of monetary bail in Utah. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
I haven't shared this, but at the risk of sharing it with this group, just to give you a sense. So the first chart here is the number of probable cause submissions the courts receive. The green line is the number of PC submission, warrantless arrests. And you can see it's broken out by each month all the way back to May of 2019. And we were receiving about 4,000 of those until we got to the pandemic, March, April of last year, big dive. And then it came back up as jails found a way to operate, but still far below by 1,000 or so a month or more, fewer warrantless arrests being booked into jail. Within that green line is those that resulted in a monetary bail. And when you look back at 2019 in May, about 80% of the probable cause submissions that were coming in resulted in some sort of monetary condition. And you see the same sort of slide decline in the frequency with which monetary conditions were ordered as the pandemic kicked up. But what we've seen with House Bill 206 going into effect in the fall of 2020 is that there was another slide in the use of monetary bail, which recovered a bit, but still left the scenario where now monetary bail is being used about 40% of the time as a condition when a person has been arrested without a warrant. And you can see that the big change is actually not in the felonies. The second chart shows the big dive was in the misdemeanors. Misdemeanors stopped being booked into jail at the beginning of the pandemic, and then a little bit of a recovery there. And then the dip for both felony and misdemeanor with House Bill 206 was actually pretty congruent. But the major difference in volume is the misdemeanors. This shows just the ratio between felony and misdemeanors of how often monetary bail is being used. So you'll see back 2 years ago that felonies were not where the bail was being imposed most of the time. It was in misdemeanor cases. 68% of the time when a monetary condition was imposed, it was in a misdemeanor case. And you'll see that most recently, I mean, it got to about 50-50 at the time of the pandemic really kicking into gear. But now currently it's about 60-40. So there's been a shift, and bail is being used more frequently in the felony cases and less frequently in the misdemeanor cases. Just to give a sense of the percentages we've already talked about, back in 2019, when you look at felony and misdemeanor cases combined where people are booked into jail, 81% of the time there was a financial condition. Now, looking at both combined, it's about 37% of the time. So money's being used less, no question. How much, though, is being ordered? When you look at the amounts, back in the day, the felonies were averaging somewhere between $15,000 to $20,000. And there's a spike here that I don't understand, and I won't pretend to understand. And then you'll see that there's been a generalized reduction as part of House Bill 206 in October of last year in the amount that is being ordered on felony cases, again, with another spike here in March. I'm not sure why, but a reduction, so that when you look at the felonies and misdemeanors combined over the last 2 years, the average monetary bail judges were ordering was about $8,000. And the misdemeanor, if you see this line here, is completely flat all the way across the board. No change at all, both for the pandemic or for House Bill 206. I mean, just a little dive. But felony bail over the last 6 months on average has been $10,700. When there's a felony warrantless arrest, the monetary condition that's ordered, which is less frequent, right, at 37% of the time, is still $10,700. And this, even though the ability to pay matrix says that the recommended amount ought to cap out at $5,000, judges are still well in excess of that, more than double that on average, partially because we aren't eating our own dog food, and partially because there's a change afoot that takes time as people's thinking changes, and partially because I think judges are still looking at it and saying, I think that's not enough. I think there needs to be a higher monetary condition in this case, right, wrong, or otherwise. So I share that data just to give you some sense of kind of where things stand on the bail issues. And I tried to share some of these numbers, although not the charts, with the working group, and I couldn't get anybody to seem to care about these numbers within the working group. And so we'll see if there's more attention to this sort of data. I hope that there will be, though. There's certainly things the courts need to learn from this. And that is that my primary takeaway is monetary bail is alive and well. in Utah still. So when people say we're trying to do away with bail, judges aren't ordering it ever. It's not getting used anymore. House Bill 206, was the end of it all. It's just not true. It's probably still being used too much in many ways. But anyway, so I share that with this group, so give you some insight.
I think it's just because you didn't present it in such pretty colors and such nice graphs. That's why no one cared.
People like visuals. I actually went to Representative Schultz afterwards and I said, I have graphs and charts and stuff. Would you like me to present this to the group? And he said, why don't you hold on to that for a little bit? So
I thought it was very helpful, to Michael's point that, perhaps monetary bail could be a starting point, and then judges would consider, well, what could this particular defendant afford? What's affordable? What is going to be a bail amount that this particular defendant, charged with whatever it is, third or second degree, might be able to meet that bail condition? They don't do that. I would just say that absolutely is not the way bail operates. Monetary bail, the judges are tied into that number, and then you can say, Judge, Your Honor, there is no way that Mr. Bugden is going to be able to meet that amount. There's no way he could reach or attain the $20,000 bail amount. And the judge says, well, that's the bail. There isn't the second step. There's not the second step that Michael's talking about.
Michael, that point that you brought up, and that is it's incumbent on the judges to exercise the discretion that is found in the statute. That was the problem in the federal system for years under the sentencing guidelines. Too many of them, it was so easy for them to just say, it's what the guideline says, you're stuck. And until the Supreme Court in Booker turned them around and said, no, you've got discretion under that. And it's only a guideline. You can go up or down, but you need to make the findings. The same thing happens in the federal system with the bail system. The presumption there is for release in the federal system, unless the judge makes a certain finding. And then the system is different in that when an individual is brought in, within 48 hours, pretrial detention has done a pretrial report for the judge that includes all of these conditions. And one of the things that they address federally is whether there's any way the individual can post any kind of a bail. There's all kinds of conditions that as a magistrate judge, I could impose. I would never force an individual to have to go and get a second mortgage on the house or sell a car or anything like that to post bail. That was ludicrous as far as I was concerned. So I wouldn't do that. But again, it's incumbent on the judges to really exercise the discretion that the statute gives them. And you're right, it's too easy to default to it and just say, that's what the number is. That's where I'm going to stay. That, unfortunately, doesn't speak very well for the judges, but it may be true. And when you look at the numbers of individuals that appear in front of them, that's another issue to consider as well, especially misdemeanors. Because the numbers are just, they go through the roof. Anyway,
So
that's the only comment I have.
Yeah, I'd like to pick up on Sam's point. My experience in private practice doing work for a municipality and otherwise has been that particularly in the misdemeanor area or, in the justice courts, they're really, the bail schedule or the presumptive bail really rules. And that's the place where I think if you look at all the bail studies, and maybe I'm just beating a dead horse, but all the bail studies say those are where the people least able to afford big bail go. This is the place where people get handicapped with job losses and all the rest of those things Mary was talking about. And to Michael's point, if the Judicial Council could somehow get judges to actually do what they're empowered to do, and I would argue supposed to do,
Yep.
that might go a lot farther than anything we're going to get out of the legislature.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think it starts with the design, the user interface, as it were, for the tool that we give the decision maker. If you give them a tool that is designed to be a shortcut, it's going to get used as a shortcut. If you give them a tool that, coupled with sufficient information, says use your discretion, right? Here's a recommended amount, but you're not stuck with this. This is just the starting point. Here's all these other things, and here's all this information to help you make the right decision. Then people can flex their muscles and do their job. One of the things that we struggled with House Bill 206 as a court system is when we looked at the requirement that if a financial condition be imposed, that the judge has to make an ability to pay determination, we thought, where are we going to get that information? The legislature didn't mandate the collection of or the provision of any information on that as at the upfront part of the case, right? Somebody's arrested, we're making decisions in the first 24 hours. Where do we get information about ability to pay? And through a lot of hard work from some individuals with conversations with sheriffs all in every single county, we were able to get an agreement that they would ask 3 questions, right? How many dependents? What's your household income? And do you refuse or are you unable to respond? And we plug that into the electronic PC system. That's so rudimentary though. There's so much more that goes into an ability to pay than just household income and dependence. But at least it was a starting point. And so judges could look at it and say, okay, now I have at least some information to make some decisions. If we could flesh that out, and I was talking to Representative Schultz and Dan Burton at the AG's office about this yesterday and said, look, the courts can't mandate the executive branch to collect information for us, but you can. And if you put it in statute that there's some obligation to collect and provide information, we can do something with that. And I think they're open to that, honestly. And I will say too, to some of the earlier points about, the disproportionate representation of bail bondsmen in these work groups. My conversations, especially with Representative Schultz, is that he's had some eye-opening experiences over the last few months as he has talked to people, learned from them about the impact of monetary bail on the indigent population in the state of Utah. He has acknowledged to me, and he's starting to speak about with his own vocabulary an understanding related to the fact that we can't just have a bail schedule that's just doesn't look at the circumstances of individuals. I think that's a huge gain because you've got somebody in Republican leadership in the House who is taking the time to care enough to wrap their head around the issue and will take that message back, push back against colleagues. And I honestly think it's one of the best developments that could have happened under the circumstances that we find ourselves. It's actually really gives me a lot of hope. So
I don't want to be a buzzkill, Michael, but the other side of the legislature wants to audit indigency. So there is a bit of a downside.
So true.
We've been talking about the right to counsel and how the affordability of an attorney is somewhat of a similar determination about the affordability of bail, but in some effect, it's really different. And I think the fact that most people think paying $100 for bail is affordable is the problem here, right? Because we know our 80% of clients can't pay it. And so having some workaround to a bail schedule that either starts at 0 or has other factors a judge can consider is going to have to be critical. Sorry, Mary, I didn't raise my hand and now you're raising your.
I'm just trying. No. I just wanted to point out against the charts that we just saw, the recent research that says of American adults, only 45% of them could come up with $400 right now for an emergency if they had an emergency requiring $400. That's only $400, and that's only 45% of the population. There is a huge swath of the population that cannot come up with any kind of significant bail. And I agree wholeheartedly with the theory that judges ought to be looking at these cases as individuals. But earlier this week, I've done 2 or 3 different cattle call calendars in 2 or 3 different courtrooms where the number of cases set for afternoon determination on a criminal calendar in the state court, at least in the Wasatch Front, is over 100 cases per calendar for a 3-hour setting. If my arithmetic is right, that's 1.8 minutes per case to make a disposition of those cases. And if you don't do it that fast, you're into overtime at the jail and overtime at the courthouse. And eventually there's an exhaustion factor for a judge who is, after all, just a human being who has to consider 100 cases in an afternoon and theoretically give them all highly individualized consideration. If we really want that kind of highly individualized consideration, then the state needs to invest millions of dollars in more judges for the courts to take these calendars, more pretrial services workers to provide in the state system the kind of pretrial report that Sam was talking about receiving in the federal system. And I mean, I had a client yesterday for whom the non-appearance issues was a lack of transportation. You know, if there was a reliable mass transit system that available to all persons in the state of Utah, more of them would get to the courthouse on time. There are so many factors that factor into this, and it all leads back to funding. And I'm afraid it's just much easier at some point to say, if you can throw $1,000 down on the table, you're out. And if you can't, we're going to lock you up, which also comes back to money and is a false economy. But yes, we need more individualized assessment of people, but we can't do it in the current system.
Thank you for all those comments. I don't want to cut this matter short, but Joanna, did you get kind of the thoughts that you were looking for as you're working with that group, and Tom and those others?
I did, and I had a justice court judge over my shoulder listening in on them, and he was very interested in your data there, Michael. No, I think it's really helpful. And if you read through those drafts, you'll see some concerning things, and I would appreciate hearing from you all on them. So keep up the discussion, please, and talk to Tom and Michael also, and Rich. So yeah, we're good. Thank you.
Just make sure that the records reflect that we had a visitor as part of the meeting. So
my dog is in the room too. I don't know if you want to make sure we put that in the minutes.
Totally up to you. I do not speculate on people's pets. I've learned that's a treacherous road. Remaining fiscal year 22 grant issues.
Yes.
Joanna, you want to lead us in this?
Can everyone see the meeting materials now? I've shared them incorrectly and then didn't share permissions, but now I sent out to you all the response that Duchesne sent us after our discussion. I have talked to Lorraine about this a bit. I withheld drafting any response because it would have been untoward given the way I was feeling about their decision. But we do really need to put something in writing to respond to the inaccuracies in that letter, because that can't be the final word, because there's a lot of it that is just patently untrue. And we have to clarify one aspect of their question. So I wanted to get guidance from you all on responding to them and how you want that to go. I will share the screen in case you don't remember the Duchesne letter by heart. Does anyone else have any thoughts on the Duchesne letter that they want to share, that they want me to respond? Has everyone had the chance to read it?
Yes.
This is what we suggested they shouldn't do, and they're going to do that. This is about their managing defender. And then they have a question about appeals and some other things. Does anyone have thoughts they want to give me? on composing the letter, or does someone else want to write it? Wally? That was a yes. I heard that through your muted microphone.
No, I was not volunteering. You're wrong.
So it's fine. They have no obligation to take our money, right? The problem this situation leads to is that when we know something is wrong and we can't work with a county in a way to fix it, it goes unattended, and then we know Rome is burning and we're just sitting there. So that's the part of this that this situation that has really vexed me, is where's our accountability for these things if we don't have a financial relationship with them? And even then, the worst we could do is cut funding. That doesn't help things. So I don't know if it's a statutory change or a something change that we need, but I think that needs some discussion. Please, anyone.
Can I just offer on the cutting funding? You're right, it doesn't solve the problems there, but then we can move that funding to other worthy applicants that are willing to abide by where we're going with things. You know, we can't fix all the problems as we've seen with the cities, but we can make the money do the best that is within our options. And so if they want to walk away from it, that's up to them from my standpoint. And then we can redistribute that to someone who doesn't want to and who wants to play by the rules we've set forth. And realizing I say that when the cities are the worst at this. But I think we've drawn that line in the past, and we can continue to draw one in good faith.
I maybe throw a little bit in. I'm still not, being fairly new to this whole process, my head still isn't quite wrapped around what we have to do, whether statutorily or just best practices versus what we can do or should do. And all I know is this: for all the years that I've spent trying to manage, or not manage, but be involved with, you know, large, small, medium agencies, which I think this attributes to the very same discussion here, large, small, medium counties and the challenges they have one versus the next. I probably still today, even in this role, spend most of my time fighting through relationship problems that get developed. So CCJJ does a lot of grant funding for a lot of agencies. And when it doesn't work well, it can be very embattled. And generally we work it out. But this line, when it gets to the point where somebody walks away from it, and if it's a new program or direction that we're trying to move something, that can have devastating effects if others, so in this case, other counties here or buy into that Indigent Defense Commission is not your friend. They're not helping you. You're better off not marrying with them outside of whatever the statute and law requires. Obviously, that's a factor here. But I watch this in law enforcement over and over again. Legislation gets passed, law enforcement's supposed to do this. In cases where they can't do it, then the next step is to come back in and punish. So I am very worried about Duchesne. I'm worried about Commissioner Hanson. I'm worried about folks that have been very favorable towards the Indigent Defense Program and have been seeing this as, and if money, if their financial situation is, you know, they refer to the case that sucked a lot of funds from them. You guys know that better than I do. But if money is what's hurting them, I just am worried that we take the money, we take this grant away. It's justified. I completely understand it, but I don't think it's just a Duchesne issue. I think this will be another county conversation, and they could be the ones generating that, and I'm worried about it. So if this is an evolution of indigent defense, of building programs, and year after year we're trying to move things along, then maybe the timing isn't right to start cutting ties. But I worry that this is going to be seen as we're cutting ties. That's just my third, kind of from the outside looking into this.
Brian, you have hand raisers.
Go ahead and just don't speak over each other.
I appreciate
So,
Tom.
earlier.
I appreciate Tom being worried about the consequences of us cutting ties with Duchesne, but Duchesne's misrepresenting the situation. When we spoke 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was in favor of a more heavy-handed response than Tom, and I think maybe even Ryan were proposing a more moderate response to Duchesne. But Duchesne's not playing by the rules. They're not meeting our expectations and what we require. I think we should, if they don't want to accept the money with the requirements that are necessary to receive that money, that's their decision. But I think we just set the record straight, send them a different letter, correcting the misstatements. And I think we cut them off. That's my view. And Tom might be right that maybe somehow this creates some sense with other counties that the IDC is not their friend, but it seems ridiculous. Duchesne's walking away from a lot of money. I don't know why a county would reach that conclusion. I don't know why a county that's always concerned about, do we have enough money to meet all of our expenses, and that we have to, what we have to do for as a county, why they wouldn't want to accept money from the state.
Thank you,
You
Wally.
know,
Michael, then Sean.
yeah, I tend to be a pragmatist, a little like Tom. I am concerned about us doing anything that puts a weapon against us in somebody else's hands. I mean, I think, you know, their letter is blithely, you know, rolls right over everything we said. No problem, you know, we expect everybody's going to take a pay cut and keep doing their work is essentially what I think they're saying. So I think the first point is we want to make sure we send them a response that doesn't argue with them, but that does say explicitly, here's a list of issues that you don't seem to be, or where we seem to miss at odds. And it isn't true that we're saying this, and it isn't true we're doing this, and it isn't true we're doing this. And we're quite concerned about this, this, and this. The question of whether we cut them off completely is a separate question, I think, because there are two. If we cut them off, as has been suggested, then we give them something that Tom's worried about, and I would be worried about too. If in doing that, we've kind of cut the legs out from under their positions, at least we're protecting ourselves as much as we can. I don't know whether I'm missing something. Was there ever maybe in the drive I missed it. Is there does anybody know the backstory behind this? Is this the county attorney? What's going on? A county commissioner?
I think Joanna's muted. I'd say on staff's behalf, no, we have no idea what they're doing. If I can just add quickly to Chair, I think, I don't mean to step on Sean, but we have given Duchesne County many, many options, a lot of time, a lot of discussion to see what they wanted to do. And so when they write and say, we don't want to participate anymore, I don't see what more we could do to pull them in. I fully agree with Tom's concerns about how this works out and what happens. But Duchesne County said, we don't want to participate, and they haven't done much of anything that shows they'd be willing to work with us more. I don't know what we would do in the future other than frankly just toss money at them. So maybe the problem is to try to resolve what we have.
Adam, do you think maybe they've just decided they're going to recover whatever losses they've suffered by reason of these capital cases and these murder cases. And they're just going to cut if wherever they need to cut to recoup the money, and then maybe they'll be back another time and start out at a new ground zero.
But that's a good idea. That's entirely possible. Clearly, they want to save money somewhere. Not sure why it makes sense to not take hours though, right? Instead of coming up with
Yeah. Thank you.
Hey, coincidentally, I had started it, never finished it. I on the plane, I took a lot of reading that was in a stack, and I finished that article, the draft article that Joanna had sent to us a long time ago, kind of a look at the devolution, I believe it's called, of indigent defense and how it impacts rural counties particularly. And just fascinating to me. And I mean, it sounds like this is commonly done across the United States, that, counties will do RFPs. They'll just do RFPs. And it really describes in there how that impacts the quality of indigent defense and defense. So anyway, I just, knowing that this meeting was coming up and that I was able to finish that article, I thought it was a very good description of what we're noticing in Duchesne.
Thank you.
And it happens in other places too.
It does.
Which is why we're trying to do what we're trying to do. Anyway, there you have it, Ryan.
Thanks. Tom, give me 1 second. Sean, I didn't forget about you, and then Tom.
Well, it's probably all for good. As a recovering politician, I try not to pontificate on too many things that I don't need to anymore, but I can tell you that everything that I was thinking as I raised my hand has already now been said. And I feel guilty because I'm the one who I feel kind of put a pause on it during the last time we all got together like this, because I wanted to make sure, out of political sensitivity, not to cast them away too quickly or to be perceived as too heavy-handed. And I think that Michael just did so far more eloquently than I did. But like Tom, there's got to be that line in the sand. And I just feel, after having read that letter, my heart aches. And Lorene, if you're still with us, what I'm saying. I want these guys to come along. To Michael's question, there's clearly more work in the background that not all of us are aware of. And I don't know how to explain it, so I don't know how to overcome it. But as a recent peer of theirs, I'm really frustrated by the tone of their letter. And I kind of want to go from 0 to 60 red-blooded Scotsmen in a hurry and put some smack down. And so I feel like my gut instinct is, okay, they've crossed the line and it's time to just cut it. Because like Tom said, you don't want to be married to that if that's going to impugn the rest of your program. And I know none of us want to have those kind of implications as we ask Joanna and her staff to go back to the legislature and give good, credible reports on the rest of the good work that's being done. So I don't have any solutions. So here I just did what I was trying to avoid, and I pontificated without coming to any strong conclusion. And I'm out.
As a recovering politician, you'll get over that probably.
No, that never ends, unfortunately. I do have a comment.
Can we take Tom first, Sam, and then jump to you? I'm just trying to go over as I see hands.
I'll keep it quick. So the RFP issue, do we have other counties that are doing RFP contracts?
Yes.
So historically, I'll answer that one. Historically, that was the only way they did it, right? And they didn't know who to talk to except their county attorney about it because they had no other lawyers there. One of the problems that was identified in the reports and the lawsuit was those one-year contracts do exactly this, right? They disrupt things, and the lowball bidder is always going to be the one who gets the contract. So Ryan bids $1 million, I bid 100,000, I get the contract, and no one knows what the caseload is. So yes. They still do it because it's also public money, right? But we've gotten them to do RFPs for longer periods of time.
So, so there, because I almost get the sense from their letter that they're saying this is good business. This is normal business. It's fine. And so if I want to argue against what we're trying, because I get that we want to move past that. And it sounds like we had that in place. Now they're going backwards, which could be funding driven. It could be this case and the costs and the budget challenges they faced out there. They see it maybe as the only option. But was there anything in the conversations about you take a step back here, but you come back 2 steps forward in 2 years or a year? Or is there anything we're able to do more on this case, this Tinman case, that to help with some of the costs that I don't know. I just, if someone doesn't have money, and maybe they do, I'm just going off of some of the politics, the economic discussions, and we're forcing someone to do something they can't, in their minds, they just can't afford. Is there a way to save the relationship still? And maybe we're past it, but.
So Tom, I think that is a little bit of the disconnect. That's what they represented in their letter, but that's not at all what we have been communicating to them. So those Tinman cases were 5 defendant cases that were initially charged as aggravated murder. And then as aggravated murder cases, the state pays for those through the county fund. They had to downgrade them to murder cases. And so the defenders went to the court and Judge Chiara ordered fees on those. And the fees were an hourly fee and defense resources. So those cases have mostly concluded. We are actually handling the appeal on at least one of them. I don't know what the future will be, but because they've concluded, there's no obligation to keep spending just for the sake of spending, right? The statute doesn't require you to just throw money into the wind as a county. But the problem with them was they had this bulk of money. They don't need to use as much of it anymore, but they were still asking us to fund this much, right? And then not taking this bulk and putting it to the other things. So they were asking to, be able to cut it and then supplant it with state funding. Whereas what we were telling them is take that money that you don't need in this category and put it over here, and then tell us what you need on top of that. And that was the disconnect. And I think the thing that they say in their very last sentence, we welcome and will consider any future suggestions the IDC sees fit to offer Duchesne County. We now move forward firm in our conviction with the best interest of Duchesne County at heart, and thank you for all the role you have played in assisting us in the end, right? Like they've made the decision on the funding. The thing we just need to clarify is that there's some factual inaccuracies on it. We don't have to make a decision on whether to cut them off. They've made that easy for us. So I think I have gotten some good points on this. I think we'll have Sean and Tom draft the letter. So Sean can go in one direction and then Tom can temper him. I'll take a draft of it and I'll send it around before I send it out.
And I think Margaret had some thoughts, and then I wanted to clarify one thing, Joanna. Go ahead, Margaret.
Well, and obviously I'm, really troubled about the juvenile piece of it, because that to me, number one, is not tied in any way to the district court and the homicide spending. And the other one, I don't know whether Adam or, Leslie have seen numbers, but I have a hard time believing that the caseloads have just bottomed out in the juvenile court. That seems to be their reason for asking for a new RFP, where they're not, they're clearly, from my understanding of their RFP, is they literally are looking for the lowest bidder. They haven't changed the contract amount, lowered it. They haven't said this is what it is, reapply. It's literally, if you're interested, submit and tell us what you are willing to do it for. So that piece, that is troubling to me. And I don't have an answer. If they're saying we're not going to apply, we're not seeking a grant this year, how do we even help there? And do they really want the help?
Thank you, Margaret. One thing, I'm kind of like Michael in a pragmatist, but I'm kind of a pragmatist looking at it from a different perspective. Years ago, we had the same situation with the city, and the city walked away, and we haven't had a lot of cities come back, but we're still efforting and trying to figure out how to solve that problem. I think we're going to have this problem at times, but it's their choice. If we then throw money at somebody who said they don't want it, the political pressure we saw last year with a certain application and stuff, we kind of undermine our own rules. So if we need to revisit the rules, I'd say let's do it over this summer in a work group. But if we're not going to change our rules, then we should follow them and be polite in the letter. So whoever's got the most polite pen, but I think the response would be, invite them to keep coming back when they're ready. But if we don't do it on the terms we set for everybody else, then it becomes very difficult in the future to have any integrity in looking at these grants. And as we saw last year, we're going to run out of money at times. Hopefully we keep getting it, but we do hit our limits. I had to get that in there, Joanna. I can't go a meeting without pointing that out. Any other comments on this issue?
Yeah, can I make my comment now? Okay.
I apologize.
Sorry,
I forgot.
that's all right. I understand. I've been at the back of the bus all my life, so that's fine. It is what it is. Here's my concern, all right? For the longevity of this program, we need to make sure that whatever responsive letter we send back to them takes care of the inaccuracies in their letter. And if you have to be forthright and point it out, and point out why. Because the validity of what this program stands for really depends on that. You need to clarify that, number one. And number two, I agree with what Ryan just said. We were in a situation where the legislature had put us behind the 8 ball in terms of money available for whatever needed to be done. And then it turned around. We didn't know that at the time. We were laboring under another assumption. And, every recipient of aid that we render needs to be aware of that. We are at the mercy of the legislature where it comes to that. But my biggest concern is we need to rectify the mischaracterization of things that have occurred. That needs to be forthright in the letter. Okay? That would be my point.
Ryan, could I make?
Final word, unless Adam really wants to.
No, hearing that, I will withdraw my comment. Thank you.
So do you have enough direction, Joanna?
I think so. Not that sending a letter to 15 lawyers, well, most 14 lawyers won't result in some future updates, but feel free to update away. We do have one other outstanding grant issue.
Utah, right?
Yeah. In the materials, there's a letter. So they reached out to us about this a while ago, and I asked them to submit a follow-up letter. I'll just share the screen in case you can't view it. So the problem is that they did not request mileage because when COVID hit, we cut their benefits to their defender. We cut benefits to all defenders. We just paid salaries. And with Uinta, we didn't reinstate them, right? The county took over those fees, but the county did it by saying they're doing exactly what we wanted Duchesne to do. They took 80,000 from another area. And so they thought we might restore their benefits, so they didn't ask for mileage, but mileage was the trade-off. We ended up funding only mileage. So they are coming back and saying, look, we miscalculated here. We really do need the mileage on top of this. So it's late. Our staff has debated whether it's a mistake that should be granted or if it's a genuine. But part of me feels somewhat, and Ryan's not going to love this part, but we created the Uinta County Defender as a county employee, right? We said to the county, if you create this position, we will pay for salaries and benefits, because that was one of our very first grants, and we were pioneering the idea and the model. And we said, we will take this full part, county, you keep your share of all the contract payments. I think we added one additional contract. And then COVID hit and we just chopped it. And now the county's taking it over. So it's a little bit of a balancing between historical equity. This is one of our higher paid managing defenders because of those benefits, but that isn't necessarily an apples to apples comparison, since some of our other managing defenders are contractors, so they have to pay for their benefits out of the contract amount. So go ahead and vote and tell us what to do on this one, please. And I will stop sharing because it's kind of hard to read.
Any comments or thoughts? Sam, you're first on this one if you want to.
No, I don't have a comment. I mean, if they didn't include the mileage and then that's what we funded, I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that is.
Staff, can I ask a question? Do we have the funds that could cover it, or are they previously committed elsewhere?
And we have a new influx of funds. And this is,
Oh, really? From where?
yeah, we could have funded that even without it, because it is a total of
10,000.
10,000. Yeah, it's.
Do we have other requests, or what would we do with that 10,000 if we don't work with Uinta?
We have about, we're about to hit the end of the quarter and we'll know exactly how much money people have or haven't spent for that. But our best guess is that we'll have about 700,000 in non-lapsing funding. We knew we would have about that much. We've talked to CCJJ a lot, keeping that buffer of about 500,000 is kind of the safe zone. That being said, the legislature wants us to try and pilot these early appointment of council things. I think we need to use some of that money for that. But the point is 10,000 is not going to affect it one way or the other.
And our history with Uinta has been, they've been probably one of our, if I remember right, Sam, Michael, some of us who've been here from the very beginning, they've been like the first partner and a very good one throughout.
Yes, I would say so. They, in the beginning, it was a struggle, but they have evolved mightily. And yes, they have taken over a lot. And almost all of their attorneys come from the Wasatch Front, because Tom, you and the governor put Jeff Ross on the bench, and he was one of their only local defenders. So I know one of their defenders comes from Summit County, and then at least two others come from Salt Lake. So mileage is not important.
In mileage, we, I think, agreed to fund tier 3 across the board. Is that right? Yeah, my vote is to fund it.
If that's the motion, I second it.
I have a motion and a second. Any concerns or other questions as to the motion in the second?
Can I ask a really quick question on the letter that Uinta County submitted? Is the third page in that letter an original document that they are resubmitting, or is this a revised document to reflect? I'm assuming it's a revised document, but it doesn't say clearly that it is. Because it includes mileage for contracted attorneys at $10,000 in the final box on that page. Is that them adding that as part of this request?
I'm just going to share the screen so we all know what Michael is talking about, so we can look at this. You're talking about this page, right?
Yep.
So is Greg, my staff, Greg on here? Can anyone?
Yep, I'm here. Sorry.
Okay. I feel like you are the best guide on whether this originated with you and which lines are different.
So this is from Uinta County on their application.
Was
No,
it
it's
from the
on the
update
letter.
though, with the request for travel money at this point?
Greg, did you
Or
create
is
this
it-
document or did they?
So I believe this document is from their application, correct?
No,
So
it's from this letter. I don't know what its origin is.
yeah, but that looks like a screen capture of the budget narrative from the application.
Okay.
So if it,
So had they requested 10 on the other ESO breakdown, the 6th or 5th line down at the very bottom there, mileage for contracted attorneys, $10,000. Was that something they had originally requested?
Not in the original application, no.
So this is an updated request based on their desire to get that $10,000 now.
That's correct.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Other comments or questions as to the motion?
I
Okay.
agree that this is confusing. That was a good question, Michael.
It is. Very good question. Do we need a roll call vote?
I can do a roll call vote, or we can ask if there are any.
I think since it's money, it's an actual grant spending. I prefer roll call vote.
I have one other question before we vote on the motion, if that's okay, Chair. If other people get word, other entities get word that Uintah County made kind of a, I don't know if you call it a late ask, but this kind of request, and they say, oh, we'd like travel too. Because I know when we approved mileage, it was for a select number of, I can't remember, it was like 3 or 4 different entities. Would we have funding sufficient to cover other requests? Would we entertain those requests? Or are we only doing this in the Uintah County context because of the deep and abiding partnership we've had with them, because of the kind of fringe benefit issue that they've articulated in their letter? In other words, would we be able to afford the same sort of latitude to other entities if they made a similar sort of request at this point in time?
And can I direct that question to Margaret and Sam, since they made and seconded the motion?
May I help them? May they designate
Please,
to
you
help
better
you?
know the answer.
So I believe Margaret and Sam, you asked me. I think we would do Uintah, because of the deep and abiding relationship, was the only one who figured out to ask. I also think we funded all the ones who really need mileage, right? The 4th district with long travel, 4th and 6th district with long travel distances, plus Uintah. We had mileage, I think, for Duchesne. There aren't, off the top of my head, huge travel distances for the other defenders, with the exception of Grand, but I think Grand had some mileage. Greg, you'll correct me if I'm wrong. But we can, I think it would be fair to say, look, if you still need mileage, come back and ask for it, because we do have some funding. And we know this is key to Mary's earlier points, that it is key to the structural benefits, right? We don't have attorneys everywhere.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
I would only add, it seems like the cost versus the benefit, it's a low cost and fairly high benefit from what I've gathered over the years.
Would you want staff to reach out and make sure everyone has all the mileage they want? Or need?
No,
Just checking.
This is a public meeting. They're welcome to observe and hear the comments.
Can I clarify just a couple things, Mr. Chair?
Of
This is
course.
Greg. Okay, so looking at the application, the original application, they did actually put in that ESO breakdown that there was 10,000 for mileage, but they did not include it in the project budget as an ask for mileage. So they put that there was an intent to fund mileage in one way or the other, but they didn't ask for it in terms of grant funding. And then the current mileage that we have awarded is for the Iron Cane Beaver Parowan Regional Project for Nephi, Juab, Millard, Sanpete, and Utah County.
I mean, Tooele might have a couple that come from Salt Lake, but even then, I don't think they do. So I think we've covered the mileage for at least 90% of the needed mileage.
And we've extended an open invitation to those who want to come back if there's an issue.
I believe you just said that, Ryan. We sure have.
I thought it was said earlier, but sure. Does anybody else have any questions or comments before we vote? All right, Joanna, could you lead us in the vote?
Is Lorraine, Commissioner Kamalu? No. Ryan?
Yes, I'm sorry, had to unmute. Yes.
Ryan?
Yes.
Margaret Lindsay?
Yes.
Michael Zimmerman? Zimmerman, is that a yes? Are you nodding? Are you unmuting? We'll circle back. He will have unmuted in a minute.
He
I
voiced,
read lips. He says yes.
yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
Rich Morrow,
Yes.
Sam Alma,
Yes.
Sean Milne,
Aye.
Tom Ross,
Yes.
Mr. Dredgel,
Thanks, Joanna. Yeah, that's a yes.
Wally Bugden,
Yes.
Mary Corporon.
Yeah. Yes.
And Ms. Vickery.
Yes.
Looks like it's unanimous. Oh, Heather, you're on here. Heather, do you have a vote?
Yes, that's a yes.
Yay, sorry, I didn't see you up here. Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay.
It'll be interesting someday, the litigation over whether someone's head nod on a Zoom meeting constitutes a vote under the Open Meetings Act. So won't be this commission litigating it though.
I am not going to file that litigation.
Exactly. So on to number 5, summer working groups.
Yes, this should be really quick. Let me just put them. So we have a lot of things going on, like we always do, and we need commissioner help. Sorry that you volunteered, but here you are. We need your help on these 3 areas. So we know that Weber and Cash are looking into creating public defender offices, which was like all of a sudden and out of the blue, but yay, would have liked a little more notice so we could have been more helpful, but here we are. We've reached out to our national partners. We're getting as much guidance as we can to them, but I think some of your knowledge areas like Ryan and contracting and buildings and whatever it takes and all those aspects we might benefit from. We had talked about doing some strategic planning with managing defenders. I think Rich, you talked about that and helping get them up and running and get them the tools that they need. And then this request from the legislature about this early representation pilot. Those are the things I need your brain trust on. And we will try and keep the meetings quite to a minimum, but we will need sort of a brain trust on those. Does anyone want to help with any of those? We'll call them PD office, strategic planning, and CAFA, council at first appearance.
I'd be interested in the last one.
Okay, we got one.
So that
I'll be interested in the first one.
Ditto for that on the first.
Yes, Sean, you need to be interested in that one.
I'm happy-
Joanna, on the early representation pilot, I'm good to be involved in that.
Great. I think that'll be really helpful, Michael, because the court side is going to be key on that.
Yeah.
I'm interested in the early council pilot.
And Mary, you said you also previously emailed me about wanting to be involved in the public defender offices. Is that still an interest?
It is. Why don't I just pick the public defender offices and stick with that?
Okay.
I'm
Rich,
happy to do either PD office or strategic planning or both, however needed.
I'm going to put you primarily on strategic planning since that's an issue that I think you are uniquely positioned to help us on with all the regional collaboration, but we will also CC you in on public defender offices since you're also uniquely positioned to do that, Margaret.
Happy to help.
Okay.
Joanna, on this, oh, sorry.
ahead.
On the second element, depending on where you think I can provide value, I'm happy to help.
We'll put you tier 2 strategic planning. I love that you guys are speaking over each other to volunteer.
And that's kind of how I feel. I don't have to look up terms as much as I used to, but I still feel like the layperson with the county perspective, which is a great role.
Well,
I
you
would
be
like to ask Michael Zimmerman to show that picture again.
Commissioner Kamalo, you'd be really valuable on the managing defenders because you have one.
Yeah.
Oh, hello.
Awesome,
Come on,
Michael.
child.
Just awesome.
Joanna, I'm happy to be wherever you need me.
Where would you most like to be?
Probably PD.
Okay. I am hopeful about that, Heather.
you're taking public defender offices, Heather?
Yeah,
Then I'll take early representation. I was just gonna say, there's someone from city should be on each of those and I don't care which, so.
Yeah, good. I think that's a good organization. I think Ryan, well, yeah, it's good. Your early representation issues, I've seen them. We've talked about it. Okay,
Or lack thereof, depending on perspective.
Joanna, this is Pam. I was just waiting for you to tell me and Rich where we're supposed to go. Rich, I volunteered you for direction as well.
Rich volunteered for all of them. I'm clearly going to talk to you all about the public defender office. I mean, the early appointment issue, Pam, you might be helpful on since you've been there forever, right? And you are muted, but we've been.
I will do them all. I'm on it, like Blue Bonnet.
Well, I will be selective in how we use your time, but I appreciate that. Awesome. Great.
Joanna, if you need me to fill in somewhere, I'll do the best I can. I know that the schedule's pretty hectic, but I'll help out where I can.
Okay. On the early representation, there's enough overlap with the pretrial and bail. That might be the most helpful place, Tom, but I know you're uniquely pulled in every single direction.
No, I'm happy to help wherever I can help.
Okay, but make sure you wear the same shirt as Adam if you can.
We're going to have to coordinate for future, Adam.
Yeah, well, I'll start calling you. I'll send you photos.
Text me a photo.
Okay.
So if anybody else is thinking about it, please email Joanna what you'd like to be on, or if you have other thoughts, do that. If it's okay, we'll move on, and I'd accept a motion to go into closed session for character and competency of an individual.
So moved, Sean Mill.
Seconded.
So we are going to stop the recording, right, Ryan? Pause.
Right. Okay, we're now back in open meeting.
I have a motion to change to amend the agenda for this meeting.
Go ahead.
To include a question of compensation for the executive director.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Mary amend and Michael second. Any opposed? Okay, seeing that we amended the agenda. Do I have a motion as to the new item?
I would make a motion that we give Joanna as executive director a 10% raise.
And I second that.
This is one thing I should have asked earlier. When would that become effective, Tom?
I think as soon as we can get this approved, we'll submit it forward to the ERIC payroll through HR. So next payroll or the one following.
So it's not a fiscal year thing. It's something you can just do and play. Perfect.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, we have a motion for a 10% raise for the executive director of the IDC and a second. Who made the second? Was that?
I did, among others.
All right, as it involves money, I'm just going to run through everybody. Michael is maker of motion. How do you vote?
Yes. Yay.
Pam?
Yes.
Pam?
Yes.
Michael Drexel?
Absolutely, yes.
Sean?
Big ditto.
Margaret?
Yes, I guess I need to be more formal.
We understood you. Margaret?
Yes.
Mary?
Yes.
Tom?
Absolutely.
Wally?
I don't know. I don't know.
Wally. That's
Enthusiastic.
why you end up with two colored socks.
Tom has to go at some point.
And I enthusiastically support the idea, the concept.
So it's a yes.
Enthusiastically, emphatically.
Just say yes, Wally. Come on.
Yes.
There we go. Heather?
yes, with an exclamation point.
Lorraine?
It is my pleasure to say aye.
And I agree, yes, making it unanimous.
I think, Ryan, probably an explanation as well. that this is outside of the cost of living increase.
Agreed. Yeah, that's this 10% merit that, and whatever the state is doing this year for cost of living would be in addition to that. Very good clarification, Sam. And just to articulate a little bit for the record, this is due to extremely high performance and level of service, and that as she's created and grown the program and taken, you know, significant more responsibility than when she was originally hired. And we as a commission were somewhat lax in not revisiting this year on year, which we should have done. And so we'll be more mindful in the future. So Joanna, thank you for everything. And as Tom really does have to go at some point, I'll take a motion to, oh, Tom has.
Did we adjourn the meeting?
No? Oh, you're waving by. All right, I'll take a motion to adjourn from Sam.
I did.
Second.
Second.
Any opposed?
No. Congratulations, Joanna.
Well deserved, Joanna.
Thank you, friends. This is
Yeah.
very kind.